Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. My name's Sean. I'm your host for The Edge of Liberty on this Friday, the 25th of October. Hopefully you're having a good week. You almost made it. You East Coasters only have about 2 hours left. Here on the West Coast, you got about another 5. It's all right, though. We're going to try to get you everything you need to know and get you out the door, send you home for that drive. Though I guess more people now just work from home, so it's not always a drive. Got a lot to talk about this week, including there's some sort of election coming up. I haven't been paying much attention. But I do want to start off in the Middle East because this just came across a couple minutes ago. I'm going to share this because I didn't even have a chance to really prep it. This is out of Iran. This just happened. Now, I was monitoring because we're all waiting for the response from Israel. And there was an early warning or a version of an AWACS that was up flying over between Cyprus and Israel. There's also a group of F-16s that are radar specialists. That were landing this morning. Sorry, trying to get my stuff organized. That landed this morning in Saudi Arabia. So I do not know if that was an airstrike. I do not know if that was perhaps sabotage or if that was something else. But according to Dr. Eli David, he pays a lot to the Middle East attention, a lot of attention on the Middle East. Gosh, I got to get rolling. And that allegedly happened at the Ministry of Defense site in Tehran. So I'll be monitoring. I get a couple feeds going all over the place to see if any more comes out of that, because that's going to be huge news if that's the case. So I want to talk a little bit about John Kelly's remarks. Kamala came out, was it 2 days ago now, with a really weird, we talked about it last night on the roundtable with Rick here on KLRN. And she had this weird 3-minute press conference where it was a last minute thing. She put it out on her official letterhead, not the campaign letterhead. Everyone showed up. She said, oh, by the way, this is in summary, Donald Trump's bad. He's a fascist. And John Kelly, his former chief of staff, who resigned before he was fired, you don't want that in your resume, I guess, said that he likes Hitler and said he wishes all of his generals listened to him like Hitler did. Now, John Kelly was a 4-star general, and after these comments came out, a lot of people have been trashing John Kelly that worked with him in the White House. They said that he was gatekeeping information from Trump. They said that he was rude, that oftentimes he was just completely unprofessional. He would shut things down internally, oftentimes not even letting Trump talk to certain people who Trump had given directions to. Hey, I want you to work on this. And then when they brought back the information, Kelly would look at it and go, yeah, I'm not setting you up for that interview. We'll get to it later, and just pushed it off. Right? We talk about the enemy within. You have an unelected bureaucrat, for lack of a better term, who's gatekeeping information from the president that the president himself asked for. When Trump's talking about the enemy from within, it's people like that. And I know Rick talked about it last night. He talked about it today in the show about Trump and loyalty. Loyalty to Trump is not, you're going to do what I say when I say it 100%. Loyalty is Trump is people that are honest with him and tell him what's really going on. And the people that don't do that, the people that subvert the president and subvert Trump intentionally, like Kelly did, is an enemy within. You can say whatever you want about it. So, and everybody's come out and said, I mean, there's so many former White House staffers for Trump that have come out and said, this never happened. He never said this. He's never made these statements. And one of them is Mark Paoletta. And I'm going to read you, I'll put it up because I'm good like that. I have the technology, right? I might as well use it. Here we go. This is from Mark Paraletta's X page, and I'm going to read most of this, not all of it. But he said, I worked in the White House with John Kelly, and I don't believe a word he said. He was a terrible chief of staff who dishonestly kept information from the president to pursue his own agenda. An unelected former military official substituting his judgment for the duly elected president. Here are two examples. In 2018, Trump asked OMB Director Mulvaney to find money in the agency account to build the wall and secure our southern border. Mulvaney asked OMB Deputy Voss Vote, probably, and me as the general counsel to do a deep dive on this project to find the money where they can. It's not uncommon to have money in one places and move it to another. But Kelly prevented Mulvaney from presenting his plan to the president. Months later in a meeting, Trump said, Mick, to Mulvaney, I asked you to find me that money and you haven't. Mulvaney responded, I found the money, but I've not been able to brief you. Kelly wouldn't set up the policy time for Mulvaney to discuss the plan with Trump. So that's one example. The second example had to do with the Election Integrity Commission that was set up. I want to have the president shut it down and direct the DOJ to investigate fraud. At the time, I was counsel to the Vice President Pence, who was the co-chair of the commission. And I had developed a list of previous presidential directives to DOJ to investigate a specific matter so that when making this recommendation, I could show it was well supported by history and tradition. In a meeting with Kelly and others, I made this recommendation and shared the list of examples of presidents directing DOJ to engage in specific matters. Kelly said he would never show the list to the president because it would be terrible if Trump knew he could do this. His life was tough enough in dealing with the president, and he did not want him to know this. To my knowledge, Trump was never made aware of this. Kelly thought he knew better than and was opposed to his policies. As chief of staff, Kelly's dishonesty tried to thwart Trump's presidential policies. Yeah, I got my words mixed up. And on the wall funding, he was totally fine with not doing everything possible to stop illegal aliens flooding into our country. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a little bit of insight into John Kelly. John Kelly's left for 5 years. He's written a book. He's on a book tour now. And he's calling Trump a fascist, which Kamala has run with. He's making all of these allegations. Why? Well, I put in a post yesterday. We're not just voting against Democrats. We're voting against the uniparty that's in Washington, D.C. The neocons, the warhawks, the uniparty, they're all running it together. You wonder why things stall to a halt or fast forward at the drop of a hat. It's because of the uniparty. This is when people talk about the deep state, I think people picture like this dark, lurking back room with this one or two guys that are pulling these strings. I'm not saying people aren't pulling strings somewhere, but I talk about people like Kelly, people that are tied in to the old guard, that want to do things the way the old guard did it. That led to where we are as a nation right now. That led to massive inflation, massive government spending, wars we didn't need to stay in, wars we didn't need to be in. That's the uniparty. And the uniparty is the deep state. You have people like Kelly and other unelected bureaucrats who do things behind the scenes to subvert the wants of the elected leaders. Now, I brought this up last night, and I'll bring it up again tonight. You have to remember, at one point when Trump was in office, he found out that we had troops in Syria, and he said, get them the hell out of there. We don't need to be there. This is a bad idea. He was told, okay, I will. And then it never happened. And then when there was an attack on them, which was the Russians, it was the Wagner group, but it was Russians. I believe that's the attack that everyone brought it to everyone's attention, that we still had troops in Syria. He was told they'd be pulled. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He was told they'd be pulled, and they were still there. So now they're calling Trump a fascist, a Nazi, all of this stuff, which is absolutely mind-boggling to me. To call him that with all of the horrible things that Hitler did shows you where they are in their campaign. It's why she doesn't have too many more events scheduled. It's why I believe that they're starting to move money down ballot. This is just not when you go to and I want to say it was Rick that said it last night, and I forget who he quoted, but he said, it was Ben Shapiro calling Trump a mud monster. The more mud you throw at him, the more he grows, and that's how Trump is. The difference is because of outlets like X, which somebody said, how come you use X for all your videos and stuff? Because I want Elon Musk to get as much credit as he can, because this is one of the only places that you can come on and be this honest and direct. I'll tell you right now, I will probably get a strike on YouTube or have this video taken down. Facebook has been suppressing the hell out of us. Our reach dropped to 3/4 in the last month. Those Who Keep videos came out showing all the Facebook programmers talking about how they suppress conservative voices. Here we are again. X is one of the only places. I'm not saying that we still don't get throttled a little bit on X and that social, there's not some stuff going on, but it's more free here than it is just about everywhere else. I know there's Truth Social and Getter. I get that. But I mean, if you want to reach the masses, the more people, X is the place to be. And Elon Musk made it that way. And that's why I try to draw as much as a way of saying thanks, I guess. Draw as much traffic back. Because it does matter to shows like this, to shows like the Revert Common Sense, the Berserk Bobcat Saloon, everybody over at KLRN, our broadcasting partner. This matters because when we're trying to build something and we're constantly being suppressed, and look, I'm going off on a rant here and I'm sorry, but when I started this years ago, we were throttled incredibly. If we had a really good week, and I'm talking we had thousands of downloads some weeks on Sackheads and the other shows. And if we were touching hot political buttons, the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'd be squashed. 100 downloads, 100 views. And the only way to get around that, if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share. Smash that button. It does matter. It does help. I can tell you, I have watched the analytics in live time for other shows, and when somebody likes, I can see how much that opens it up. We're trying to get to 500 on YouTube. 500's a good point for us. It opens us up more. But liking, subscribing, commenting is the best way for us to get pushed out more because it goes against the algorithm. It jumps it. Sorry, I ranted. It does happen. But I want to go back to them calling Trump a fascist and Trump a Nazi. This gentleman that I'm about to share with you is 94 years old. He was a survivor of the Auschwitz camp, and he released this video, and I just want to have you watch it because it's really moving.
My name is Jerry Wartsky. I'm 94 years old and survivor of Auschwitz and the death marches. Adolf Hitler invaded Poland when I was 9 years old. He murdered my parents and most of our family. I know more about Hitler than Kamala will ever know in 1,000 lifetimes. For her to accuse President Trump of being like Hitler is the worst thing I've ever heard in my 75 years living in the United States. I know President Trump, and he would never say this, and Kamala Harris knows this. She owes my parents and everybody else who was murdered by Hitler an apology for repeating this lie.
Why should the Jewish people support President Trump?
Because he's a mensch. I believe that President Trump is definitely going to be good for Israel, because in everything that he's done up to now was in favor. He never double-crossed anyone, and he never showed any weakness. Watching President Trump pray for the hostages at the Ohel and spend time with him so meaningful. He has always stood with the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
Now that's I know it's a Trump ad. I get it. I'm not dumb. But the reality is you have this gentleman, which I mean, how do you argue with what he has been through? How do you counteract that? But they calling Trump Hitler and a fascist and all of these horrible things is not moving the needle. It's not working. But they're going to keep going and they're going to keep doing it. Thank you in the chat room. If you send me a chat, Facebook for some reason doesn't show me your username, so I apologize. I'm not rude when I say thank you, user, because I don't. The other ones I get to see names. Twitch, YouTube, it shows me your name. For whatever reason, Facebook doesn't play well with this program. But when you are calling Donald Trump Hitler, are calling him a fascist, when you are literally the ones prosecuting him over and over and over and using lawfare, you're proving our point when we say that Democrats have this amazing tendency to point their finger and blame you for stuff that they're already doing. And this was another example. It's gross. And it's not just her. You also have the Hill Dog, Hillary Clinton. And I'm sorry to do this to you. If you're eating lunch or whatever, I can't. I'm sorry. Here's your warning. You're going to see Hillary. She's just makes me ill.
Now, one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany. So I don't think we can ignore it. Now,
all right. She's just such BS. And what she's referring to is the Nazis in 39 held a rally at Madison Square Garden before we got into the war. New York and the Northeast had a large German population and were descendants of Germans. And there were a good amount that supported what Hitler was doing before everybody knew about the concentration camps and the Holocaust. And I'm not saying that it would have changed their numbers, but I'm sure it would have changed some numbers, because I'm sure there were plenty of people who are like, yeah, I'm not down for that. It is grotesque. It is vile. And it is the most, I'm going to say, this is un-American. You know, they always accuse us of, oh, you're being un-American. You're being un-American. I got to take a break here. But it is the most un-American thing to just blurt out because you oppose somebody and their politics and their supporters to call them Nazis and fascists. It's a gross place, and the Democrats are the absolute worst for it. I'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome to River of Common Sense, where we cut through the noise of news and politics with a sharp wit and clear discussion. Tune in every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a refreshing dose of reality as we fearlessly tackle the tough topics with no nonsense, just pure common sense. Visit shrmedia.com to discover where you can catch River of Common Sense in action. He's here to amplify your inner logic. He may not always be polite, he may not always be refined, but one thing's for sure, he always tells it like it is.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And welcome back to the Edge of Liberty. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday afternoon. So I just want to highlight a point that I was making earlier. Ted Cruz just put this out because Kamala put out, Donald Trump has been very clear that he'd weaponized the Department of Justice against his political enemies. You know who does that? Dictators, right? And this is all they have anymore. But Ted Cruz said, hey, your administration is the one who's been prosecuting Donald Trump right now. This is the most tone-deaf tweets in history. And it is. Like I said, they point fingers at everything they're doing. And it's just been, it's so obvious. And where has it got them? Well, this little clip here from CNN is going to show you because it is, it's fun. This is a fun one. Just go ahead and watch it. When I say go ahead and watch it, I meant I was going to actually hit the button. There we go.
If I could chime in, a lot of this stuff, hell, I've been discussing this for over a year now on this network. The needle hasn't necessarily moved against a former president. I'm just speaking as a strategist here. There's a reason this race is tied neck and neck. Now, perhaps some people may dismiss it. Perhaps there are other priorities that people are more concerned about. But clearly, that message alone isn't resonating with enough voters to give Vice President Harris a comfortable lead in this race to be able to say, I have this in the bag. But she doesn't for a reason.
But see, it's not that message alone. This isn't the only thing that she's talking about.
It's not moving the needle. It's not moving the needle, like you said. It's not working. And why isn't it working? Well, because I think the American people are kind of sick and tired of it. Look, we just had this, and I wrote about it on shrmedia.com. We just had this woman come out after 31 years and try to pull a Christine Blasey Ford. We've seen this 100 times where they just throw, once they start throwing anything they can and using all of these hateful words or these words that are meant to instill fear into the American people, and they start pulling out these people who said, oh, you know, and a bunch of people, by the way, have already disproven what she was saying, or at least poked holes in her story. And that was the one where Mark Halperin said, hey, I had a story pitched to me and I wouldn't touch it, essentially. And that was the story everyone thinks that he was talking about because it's so outlandish. And by the way, the woman who did that was an Obama advocate. She worked for the activist, rather. She worked for the Obama administration. So where has all this gotten Kamala Harris? Well, if you follow the polls, which I don't put a lot of weight in polls, usually polls start to get closer to accurate the last week. I will admit that. And they do that because they have to save face for the next election. If they are so far off in their polling like they were with Hillary, they learned a message in 16 or lesson. If they are so far off, people throw them out. People are just done with polls. They're like, oh, this is stupid because these guys never get it right. So they tighten up in the last week. The polls right now said that at best, the public polls, not the internal polls, the public ones, at best, it's a tie. That's best case scenario right now, is poll numbers are tied. I mean, you have states like New Mexico that are within the margin of error. You have states like Nevada that looks like they may be leaning red, right? There's some people who are saying that the swing states are all going to go for Trump. And I'm not talking about, I'm looking for the one right now because it's kind of a big one. It comes from CNN. And I know I have it here somewhere. So just give me a second. But you're seeing a little bit more honesty in the polls, and the Democrats are not doing well with it. They're freaking out. Here's one I want to show you. I'll throw this up. This is out in New Hampshire. Remember, Biden took New Hampshire hands down. I think he won by like 8 points or something like that in New Hampshire. New Hampshire used to be very red, and all the mass holes, moved up there and started voting for the same stuff they were voting in mass. And now I think they're starting to see when you have mass policies show up in New Hampshire, it starts turning into mass. And I think some of them are starting to shy away from it. But right now, the New Hampshire poll is showing Harris only up by 3, 2% voting for somebody else. So undecided's 1. But I didn't expect that. Growing up in that area, I know how New Hampshire has been voting for the last amount of time. Is this? Yeah, this is the one. This is another good one. And this tells you even the pundits, the pundits are worried. Here's everybody's favorite mini-me, George Stephanopoulos. You remember George? He worked in the White House for Democrats and all that stuff.
Check this out. In 2020, Republicans were only 33% of early voters. Now it is up to 40%. So in this big state with a big Latino population, a whole lot of union members, some warning signs, at least early on in early voting for Democrats, George.
And Rick, Generals John Kelly, Mark Milley have called Donald Trump a fascist. Kamala Harris agrees. And we have some polling on that.
Check this out.
Did you hear that? Isn't that amazing how he goes right to that? He's just talking about the polls. This guy's just talking about the polls. Whether you agree with these polls or you don't agree with these polls, that's his job. He's talking about the polls. But little George had to get a dig in. Oh, well, they called him Milley. Milley, who, by the way, I think history is going to look poorly on when it comes out what he was really into. Milley was not the wonderful human being everyone was trying to make him out to be. And I know that is going to come out eventually as well. But he tried to throw that out again. And where is all of this fascist blah, blah, blah getting them? Well, the Washington Post will no longer be making endorsement for this year's presidential race. That was said in a meeting this morning. So they've lost Washington Post. The LA Times, one of the biggest left-leaning rags in the country, says that they're not going to endorse Kamala. She's lost so many endorsements. You have so many unions that are saying, yeah, we're not supporting Kamala. It's unheard of. The Pennsylvania Firefighters Union, I think they've been straight Democrat for years. They're not going to endorse. And why is that? Why is it not? Because she hasn't done anything. That's the thing. She hasn't done anything. She hasn't done anything, and she can't say anything. You know, on CNN, somebody put out, I forget who the wingnut is. There's some writer said, Ali something or other, Scumanaro, said, well, the reason why she's not resonating with it is, and people think she's speaking word salads because she's using big words, essentially. She's so smart and you people are so stupid, you don't understand what she's trying to say. No, she says things like this.
What do you say to those people, especially ones who might be concerned that, doing a big closing argument speech at a place like the Ellipse, maybe leaning more into talking about the threat of Trump to democracy and not its threats that you see to the economy?
One of the things that I love about the American people is we can hold many thoughts at once. And one of the highest priorities for the American people right now is bringing down cost, and that is the priority of my agenda and will be the priority of my work when I'm elected president of the United States.
What do you say to those people, especially ones
what
who
was
might be
that? That wasn't an answer. That was a redirection, right? She's supposed to be making this speech from the Ellipse. There's tying into January 6th, the whole thing. And we all know it's going to be why she is going to go out there and give a very loud speech about why Trump's a fascist. That's what they're just going with now. They're going to go with that, even though you've had so many people that worked in that White House say that none of this is true, right? Oh, he's going to use the DOJ. He's going to use the military. That's the other one too. I love the he's going to use the military, because one of the things that was changed, and I know Fox News came out and did a thing on it today, but one of the things that changed recently from the Biden administration is that they made a change to the DOJ doctrine that, and you can read it on shrmedia.com, that the military can be used against civilians, against posse comitatus. If you don't know what posse comitatus is, you can look it up. It was adapted essentially to have local law enforcement enforce the law and remove the military from enforcing the law. Why? Because the military did what the military does. They were using excessive force to effect arrests. It was not good. It was not good at all. And this change was finally highlighted. A whole bunch of us had seen it come out and talked about it. But this change was highlighted by RFK in the Turning Point PAC speech this week, where he talked about it. And he said, hey, look, they're so worried about Trump using the military against civilians, but they just changed the military doctrine to allow the military to do it, right? Again, they point fingers and talk about stuff that they're doing. And I'm just going to pull this up really quick. What's been changed? Redhead Libertarian. If you don't follow her, she's awesome. And by the way, at the bottom of this, I have the PDF in the article that shows all this. But if you scroll down and you look on section C of this specific one, assistance in responding with assets for potential with potential for lethality or any situation in which reasonable foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death and serious bodily injury. That's new. That's changed. That is something that the military was restrained from doing. And they just changed it. The Biden-Harris administration changed this. Defense intelligence components may provide personnel to assist a federal department or agency, including law enforcement agency or state or local law enforcement agency, when lives are in danger. This is what posse comitatus was put in place to stop. Right? Posse comitatus is the whole reason why Trump could never have turned the military. Despite everything that they said, it was never going to happen anyways. But that was one of the things that were in the way. And people are going to say, well, you know, the National Guard, unless acted on a federal level, acts on behalf of the governor in that state. They can support law enforcement because they're not acting as federal military. They're acting as state military, and that's very different. And what's this all leading to? It's mind-boggling to me to see this go over and over and over again. And David Urban, who was on CNN, said it. I mean, he puts this better than I can. He would put it better than I can if I hit the right button.
Best of that, who people feel that understands their concerns, their issues, their wants, their fears. Those are the people that's where the people are going to flock to that candidate in these closing days. So to Axe's point, labeling is somewhat useful. Negative campaigning we see does move numbers. But someone who has an answer for those economic issues is going to be the key.
I will say that is the platform on which most fascists get elected. So that that's famous fascists have run and said, I'm going to make the economy work better, and then all the other things come along with it that they don't talk about when they're running.
Well, on that cheery note, David Axelrod.
I'll read you.
David
I was just going to say, listen, if we're going to look at labels, I'll read you the definition of a socialist, and then we can just call Kamala Harris a socialist from here to the end of the campaign, because she fits squarely within the definition of a socialist.
Now, you can see they immediately did not like her being called a socialist, right? And look, I've called her thoughts a socialist, very socialist. She was the leftist leaning senator when she was a senator. Axelrod, who is just he's a slime ball. But one of the things that he tried to throw in is, it's very common for fascists to talk about the economy first. Every person getting elected talks about the economy, and they make it one of the biggest things because, let's face it, since we got away from the gold standard and we started the Fed, and even before that, when you look at why other countries, but I'm just talking about this specific country, the economy's always been an issue because they keep spending more money and raising the debt ceiling. So that's why, but he throws that in like nobody else has ever talked about the economy. It's so stupid at this point what they will friggin' lie about. Biden ran on the economy. That was his entire campaign, was the economy and COVID. And one was in the hand of the other. Harris was part of the Biden campaign. She's talking about the economy. She's accusing grocery stores of price gouging, 1% to 2% profit that they make. And now Target's saying, oh, we're going to lower prices on a bunch of stuff. And everyone's saying, see, they were price gouging. No, that's not that because they were price gouging. It's because they have to sell product and they'll take it at a loss short term, hopefully to gain long term. But don't get me wrong. It's going to be at a loss. It's going to hurt their books right now. Long term, they're playing the long game. They're hedging a bet that it'll help them in the future as being the store that's like, hey, we took a loss so you guys could afford stuff. Please come back to us. It's crazy. And I'm gonna share one last one before I go into my next break. And I swear after my next break, I probably won't be as angry. Yeah, I maybe. Joe Concha shared this. There it is. I need a producer, as every other podcaster says. This is how poorly the Harris campaign is performing. Tuesday, no campaigns or rally. No campaign event rallies on Wednesday. Thursday, one rally. Friday, the rally in Texas. Right up during the World Series. And only one rally in the swing states in 4 days. He says it's amateur hour. I disagree. I think it's because they're telling her to stop spending money because they might know what's coming. As I said, here comes the break. I'll be back on the other side. Please like and subscribe. Even if you hate me, help us out and come back and argue with me another time. If you're on YouTube, smash the buttons. Rebels, smash the buttons. If you're on X, pop in and say hi. I'm going to go check those chats.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome to River of Common Sense, where we cut through the noise of news and politics with a sharp wit and clear discussion. Tune in every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a refreshing dose of reality as we fearlessly tackle the tough topics with no nonsense, just pure common sense. Visit shrmedia.com to discover where you can catch River of Common Sense in action. He's here to amplify your inner logic. He may not always be polite, he may not always be refined, but one thing's for sure, he always tells it like it is.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It is Friday, getting a little out at the end. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey, just before we leave for the day in another 17 minutes, I can do this because I have one on each side. If you want to buy me a cocktail, I'm going to give you a cocktail recipe. You can click either one, or take a picture of either one of those QR codes. I'd greatly appreciate it. I do need a cocktail. God, do I need a cocktail. A couple other things to just kind of clean up, little tidbits here and there before we head out for the day. This, I don't know if this shocks anybody or it doesn't shock anybody, but where is it? There it is. Thomas Massie came out and endorsed President Trump. Now, this is kind of interesting. I don't know what Massey's endorsement record is, but he says Donald Trump will put Americans first by securing liberties at home and preventing needless wars abroad. He will make America healthy again by empowering small farmers to take on special interests that have corrupted our healthcare system. He is even committed to freeing Ross Ulbricht. I always wonder if I get that wrong. That's one of those names I always hear later. I'm like, I said it wrong, but that's all right. Who is wrongfully sentenced. For these and many other reasons, he has my full endorsement. I encourage conservatives as well as independents and libertarians to join me in voting. Thomas Massie is one of the most anti-establishment representatives out there. I've interviewed him before. Great guy, super guy. But he is absolutely one of the most anti-establishment guys. And you had Mitch McConnell come out this week and kind of all but slam Trump and Vance. Mitch McConnell is a uniparty piece of garbage and needs to go. By the way, I'm watching here on the right. If you never check out Agenda Free TV, Steve Lookner, I actually watch him all the time because for the most part, he just kind of gives fairly straight news. You can watch a lot of things in real time. He has cameras that he pays for all over the Middle East. He's not paying me. This isn't an advertisement. I just generally watch his feed in a regular. And Israel's hitting southern Lebanon pretty hard right now, but I also follow it to see if there are any more stories out of Iran. But yeah, so we have to get past these uniparty monsters, and that's what they are. They're just monsters. They're swamp rats, whatever you want to call them. This story just popped up before I came on too. This is from Raw News Alerts. Breaking. Officials say Chinese hackers are believed to have deeply infiltrated American communication networks and targeted data from phones used by Trump and Vance. Was it Verizon just recently? Or maybe it was AT&T, I know before that, but I think Verizon just recently suffered a major outage thing. And I always wonder with stuff like that if that is not the reason. But still, China is an enemy. Kamala, not necessarily, I mean, Iran's a big enemy, but China is our biggest enemy because they do stuff like that. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, we talk about the October surprise where 6 days from the end of October, 13 days from the election, something like that, 12 days, whatever. The election's right around the corner, folks. Early voting started and the early voting numbers are huge. Any October surprise, I doubt, is going to have a lot of effect because, as I said before, most of the people in this country have already made their decision. It's that small percentage that all of these campaign stops and commercials and everything are for. It's that small, undecided percentage. I don't think any surprise on either side will affect either candidate. Also, earlier this week, one of the Casatarian brothers, I always get them confused. They're just both schmucks in my opinion, but said, oh, there's this video that's going to be released. I heard this. A friend said this to me, showing Trump groping a young child recently at a campaign event. And he pushed that, and people retweeted and said, oh, we knew it. We got him. He came out this morning. He was like, oh, well, come to find out that video is probably not going to surface because I don't think it's real now, blah, 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 blah. That's what they're doing. And Casatarian, I almost guarantee gets money. I think I've seen that he gets money from blue PACs. Not necessarily Kamala herself. That's how they sidestep it, but blue PACs, excuse me. That's just water for right now. But that just shows you like everything that's going on right now. And election time's so weird, man. I know we get into it, like the foreign hacking and all that stuff is all the time, but it seems like during the election, things really go up. The amount of bots that have showed up on social media has gone through the absolute roof. And I've told you before, you know how you spot a bot. They have a 10-year-old account, probably a little bit longer. And they have 200-300 people. They don't have their own picture. They have a very generic picture, no banner. They don't put a lot of effort into their bio. And they just go out and start saying all these inflammatory things. And those are bots. 110% they're bots. Some of them foreign bots. Some of them here. Some of them, look, the DNC, and this has been confirmed by more than one place, has paid money to be bots for people to play bot. So it's not at all shocking. This dropped today too. A Biden judge pushed this out and said Virginia had dropped a whole bunch of believed to be illegal voters from their rolls. They did it in August. And now a judge came out and said, hey, no, federal judge, you have to put them back on. The governor of Virginia has already come out and said, well, we're going to appeal this all the way up to the Supreme Court, essentially. It's so weird to me in this country that anybody would be okay with illegal voters voting, either illegal aliens, what have you. I don't understand why anybody would be okay with that in an American election. Being a right to vote is one of the basic and most amazing and important things that we have as citizens. It's that right to choose our own leaders, elect our own leaders, but you have to be a citizen to do it. It's one of the things, it's your responsibility. It's your civic duty to vote, in my opinion. But it's also the right of a citizen. And the fact that other people could play that is problematic. And by the way, when we talk about voter fraud, I think it's heritage. If you just Google voter fraud heritage, and I think they have it. They have every case listed of all the voter fraud that's been prosecuted in the last 6 years, 7 years. So if you go back and look, you talk when people are like, show me the massive voter fraud. Yeah, it may not have been a case of 1 million ballots that were fraudulent, but there is a ton of cases with fraudulent ballots that will add up and have added up. If you haven't been following news, there's reports, still unconfirmed, that Elon Musk has at times spoken with Putin. Now, mind you, they've gone after Elon Musk nonstop since he's really come out as a conservative and a Trump supporter. Libertarian, I guess, is probably better for him, and a Trump supporter. They have attacked Musk repeatedly. They hate him. They never mention Soros. They don't much mention the money that Gates just pumped into the Harris campaign, 50 million or something like that. They never mention those guys. It's funny how they forget those guys exist. But then when Musk starts doing it, it's all of a sudden a problem. Josh Shapiro, the DOJ sent him a letter about the America PAC. This might be illegal. There may be illegal activity. Well, then bring charges. If there might be, bring charges right now. Other than that, shut up and stop interfering with the election, because that is what you are doing. Remember, that's what we were told, that the DOJ would never interfere in an election. Then they send that out. If it's illegal, stop it right now. It's all there, what they're doing. And it's not a promise that if you vote for one person, you could win the money. That's the other thing. It just says you have to register to vote. And you have to be in certain areas. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's encouraging people to vote. That's what all these PACs do. It's not different. Well, because he's close to Trump, it can be inferred. Anything can be inferred, but you don't have to be a Trump supporter. You don't have to have an R. They don't ask you who you're voting for when you sign up for it. You can just sign up for it. But the derangement has gone out of control. Now, I'm going to show you a tweet by the only man that I think is possible to have his period. This is the only man I think in this world that actually can menstruate. And this is Keith Olbermann. We need to arrest and detain Elon Musk immediately. He is operating on behalf of Russia. By the way, just so you know, Elon still allows Starlink to run for free to assist Ukraine. Not on the Russian side, on the Ukraine side. He is operating on behalf of Russia. Cancel all his contracts, seize his facilities, lock him away in a military facility. Now, POTUS, not tomorrow. He is one of the most unhinged lunatics. The fact that that guy had a TV show when he was on MSNBC is insane. What are you going to lock him up for when you don't know what's in there? You don't know, Keith. Talking to a foreign leader, especially when you run numerous large businesses like he does, huge businesses where they sell cars all over the world. Russia has a space program. We have a space program. Elon Musk is pretty much leading our space program right now. I know NASA exists, but let's face it, SpaceX is the one that's doing all the work right now. So until we know, now if he said, hey, if they ever release legitimate documents, they don't infer, they don't say they heard from a friend, blah, 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 blah. And it's provable, well, that's a different conversation. But you don't have it right now. They just hate Elon Musk because he supports Trump. And mostly peaceful memes said what I just said, but Elon is providing free Starlink to the entire Ukrainian military for over 3 years. It's their entire data and comm structure. They would lose the war in a couple of weeks without it. But yes, Elon is an agent of Putin. Yeah, exactly. Like, it makes no sense whatsoever that Elon would be helping Russia. It just doesn't. I don't understand how and why you can assume that. I'll tell you why. It's outrage. It's outrage, and they're scared. They're scared about how this is going to go. And I've said before, ignore the polls, whatever. Everybody votes. Everybody goes. If the polls are right, the loss will just be embarrassing for the left. That's the only thing that we gain. That's the only thing that's the outcome, really, is if we lose hugely because everybody went, voted, drove their friends, everyone that's legal to vote did. And these polls are accurate, which, by the way, public polls are never as good as internal polls. They're always smoked one side or the other. I get that. But for them to be this tight and we're still 13 days out, I don't think it's looking good. And one of the things that, if you're on X or anywhere, text, I don't care, do this. Send yourself a message right now with a prediction that will be the outcome for the election. I don't care if it's a state election, local election, whatever. Throw it up to me on election day before the polls close in your area. Hashtag it, screenshot it, whatever. Hashtag it SHR Media, hashtag it Edge of Liberty. You can send it right to me, to Against Tyranny. Another great hashtag to use will be election predictions. Because I've done this already. Somebody asked me, I think Rick asked me on the show last night when I was a guest, said, do you have any predictions? I said, I have one big one. I'm not sharing it till election day. But I think it's just a fun, I'm going to try to find a way to have fun with this. There's so much vitriol and anger right now in some of these spheres involving the election. You got to find a way to have fun. You just got to. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. From Fox News, a caravan descending upon the border could preview the migrant rush to sneak into the U.S. if Trump wins. Saw this coming. Look, we talk about the border, and I said this with Biden. Those migrants started election day, and the caravan started coming north. They knew what was coming because the campaign told him what was coming. Talking about voter ID, Brianna Morello at Brianna Morello on X said, why aren't we pushing for free voter IDs and for all Americans? Yes. You talk about voter ID, you have everybody say, well, some people can't get an ID, which I don't even buy that argument. But if you're a citizen, you get what's called a Social Security card, a little tiny piece of paper that's supposed to last your entire life. And I've said, why don't we issue a Social Security card, an actual card, and every couple of years you update the photo, and that is the ID you need to vote. It would. I don't care if the taxpayers pay for that. If it's a mandatory thing, they pay for the Social Security card already. How hard would that be? It'd take a couple years to roll out, granted, but you could do like you do with a lot of other things, driver's license, whatever. You could have businesses that make IDs do it as long as they're checked, certified, they blah, 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 blah. There's a chain of custody with the paperwork. Not a bad idea. Don't know why anyone would be opposed to that. If you're opposed to voter ID, then you're opposed to making sure only citizens vote. I got 2 minutes left. My drink of the week. Everyone said you keep doing bourbon drinks. You keep doing bourbon drinks. Fine, you animals. There's going to be a margarita. Tequila. And it's from Food 52. I actually made this last year. And it's a spicy margarita. But it's a fall flavor to it. 2 ounces of tequila, 1.5 ounces of apple cider, 3/4 of an ounce of fresh squeezed lime, agave in the raw. If you are a home cocktail person, you got to have some agave in the raw up on the bar. It's great. 2 pinches of cinnamon divided, 2 pinches of cayenne divided, and then sea salt or cocktail salt. Really simple. You salt the rim. You use a pinch of the cayenne, the cinnamon, and the salt if you want a little saltiness into it. Dump it out on the plate. You know how to rim. Ice, and then you combine the rest of the ingredients in. Shake it in a shaker real quick. Double strain into a glass. Garnish with a cinnamon stick or some apples or lemon. Apple would actually be good in it. And orange zest. That's it. Make yourself a margarita. You've earned it. It's been a rough week. It's going to be a rough week. The stress is through the roof. I will be so happy when the campaign's over. I love this sort of stuff, but man, it wears me out. That is it for me. I'll be back Monday, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 on the East Coast, right here on the Edge of Liberty for the hour. Check me out at 2 Against Tyranny. SHR Media on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Edge of Liberty on Rumble, Facebook, SHR Media Group. Check out our great friends over at KLRN Radio. They're amazing. Rick and the team over there, super good people. They're carrying what's going to be all of our shows starting this week in our partnership, and we're really excited about that. And shrmedia.com. Please like and subscribe. It matters. It really does matter. And vote, folks. You got to vote. You absolutely have to vote. No questions asked. You got to vote. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Edge of Liberty. Join me right here on the SHR Media Network every Monday and Friday, 12 on the Pacific, 3 on the East Coast. On this show, we'll discuss news, politics, the government, how cranky we are about the government, and more. If you want to hear hard talk, good interviews, sarcasm, bad jokes, and oh God, that really is me in a nutshell. Either way, check me out right here on the Edge of Liberty every Monday and Friday, 12 Pacific, 3 on the East, on the SHR Media Network.
Conservative media done right. You're listening